Smash that subscribe button, drop a like if you dare, and comment what you think you know. Because once you step inside this story, you won't look at prison meals the same way again. San Quentin prison meals exposed. What California inmates really eat behind bars. The stainless steel tray hit the concrete floor with a sharp clang that echoed down the tier. Guards froze. Inmates leaned forward in their cells. The man who dropped it didn't shout or curse. He just stared at the food, breathing hard, his face drained of color. Minutes earlier, he had been standing in line inside San Quentin's mess hall. Now, he was being rushed out, bent over, clutching his stomach as alarms began to chirp softly in the background. This wasn't a riot. It wasn't a stabbing. But everyone inside San Quentin knew moments like this were dangerous. Because when food goes wrong in prison, it doesn't just make people sick, it exposes cracks the system works hard to hide. San Quentin State Prison sits on the edge of San Francisco Bay, famous for death row, infamous for violence, and guarded by walls that have held California's most dangerous inmates for generations. But behind those walls, far from the public eye, lies a daily ritual that controls mood, health, and survival: mealtime. 3 times a day, thousands of inmates accept whatever lands on their trays. No choices. No substitutions. No questions. Officially, the meals meet nutritional standards. On paper, everything checks out. But inside the cell blocks, rumors tell a darker story. Meat that smells sour. Bread so stale it crumbles into dust. Watery stews served lukewarm. And inmates who learn quickly that complaining can make you a target, not just to guards, but to other prisoners desperate to avoid trouble. Investigators would later note an unusual spike in medical calls following meals that week. Stomach cramps. Vomiting. Dizziness. Symptoms brushed off as stress, dehydration, or exaggeration. Until one inmate collapsed during count, his tray still sitting untouched on the metal shelf beside his bunk. As whispers spread, so did fear. Because San Quentin runs on routine, and food is one of the few things inmates depend on without question. If that routine was breaking down, it meant something deeper was wrong. Something systemic. Something dangerous. Then came the discovery that stopped everything. A kitchen worker, shaking, pulled a supervisor aside and said 4 words that changed the investigation's direction entirely. It wasn't an accident. And when officials finally stepped inside the locked food storage area that night, what they found forced San Quentin into silence and set off a chain of events no one could control. By dawn, the kitchen was sealed off. Yellow tape stretched across stainless steel doors that had fed San Quentin for decades. Word spread faster than any official announcement ever could. Meals were delayed. Guards were tense. Inmates whispered through vents and cell bars, trading theories like currency. In prison, information keeps you alive, and ignorance can get you hurt. The inmate who collapsed during count was rushed to the infirmary, then transferred off-site under heavy escort. No public statement followed. That silence only made things worse. When food trucks finally arrived with emergency rations, portions were smaller, colder, and served without explanation. Something was being hidden. Inside the administration building, an internal review quietly began. Health logs were pulled. Kitchen schedules examined. What investigators found didn't look like a single bad batch or simple negligence. It looked like a pattern. San Quentin's kitchen was understaffed, relying heavily on inmate labor to keep costs down. Many workers had minimal training. Refrigeration units were old, some dating back decades. Maintenance requests had piled up, unanswered. Reports showed temperature logs falsified, initials scribbled where numbers should have been. On paper, everything looked compliant. In reality, corners were being cut everywhere. Then came the interviews. One inmate kitchen worker described being ordered to serve meat that had been rejected days earlier. Another admitted they were told to wash off spoiled food and send it out anyway. Complaints went up the chain, but no one wanted delays. Delays meant overtime. Overtime meant attention. And attention was the last thing anyone wanted. Medical staff began connecting dots. The symptoms matched foodborne illness. Severe cases. The kind that spreads fast in confined spaces. Yet no quarantine had been ordered. No warning issued. Inmates kept eating because refusing meals marked you as difficult, or worse, weak. As pressure mounted, someone finally talked. A correctional officer, nearing retirement, leaked an internal memo to an outside watchdog group. It warned of immediate health risks tied to food storage failures and recommended shutting down the kitchen temporarily. The memo had been ignored. When the document surfaced, officials scrambled. Press inquiries started coming in. Activist groups demanded answers. Families of inmates wanted to know what was happening behind those walls. But inside San Quentin, the danger was already escalating. Tensions flared in the cell blocks. A fight broke out in the chow line when one inmate accused another of stealing a safer tray. Guards intervened late. Blood hit the floor. And all of it traced back to one simple truth. When food becomes a threat, survival instincts take over. That night, lab results came back from the hospital. The illness wasn't random. It was contamination. And it had been spreading for days. The confirmation hit San Quentin like a lockdown siren. Contamination. Not a rumor. Not an exaggeration. A verified threat moving silently through the prison population. By the time administrators acknowledged it internally, dozens of inmates were already reporting symptoms. Vomiting, fever, weakness so severe some couldn't stand for count. Yet the prison did not shut down. Meals continued. The decision came down from above: control the narrative, minimize disruption, avoid panic. Officials feared riots more than sickness. In a place like San Quentin, panic could turn deadly in minutes. So the contaminated kitchen stayed open, operating at reduced capacity, a phrase that meant nothing to the men still being handed trays through slot doors. In the infirmary, medical staff were overwhelmed. Beds filled quickly. Supplies ran low. Requests for outside assistance stalled in bureaucracy. One nurse documented cases non-stop for 12 hours straight, later saying it felt like watching a slow-motion disaster no one was allowed to stop. Inside the cell blocks, inmates noticed patterns long before officials did. The same units. The same meal items. The same timeline. Word spread that it wasn't the bread or vegetables, it was the protein. The meat. The cheapest part of the meal. Some inmates refused to eat. Others had no choice. Skipping meals meant losing strength, losing focus, losing leverage. In prison, weakness is a currency others collect. Then came the first death. It wasn't announced. There was no alarm. Just a stretcher moving down a corridor under dim blue lights, escorted quietly past locked doors. Officially, it was a medical emergency. Unofficially, everyone knew. Someone had eaten. Someone had gotten sick. Someone hadn't made it back. That's when fear replaced anger. Guards began wearing gloves during meal service. Some avoided eye contact. Others rushed trays out as fast as possible, like the food itself might turn on them. The divide between inmates and staff narrowed, not in trust, but in shared dread. Outside the walls, pressure mounted. The leaked memo gained traction. Journalists requested records. Families demanded medical updates that never came. A state oversight committee scheduled an emergency review. Inside, evidence started disappearing. Temperature logs went missing. Kitchen cameras malfunctioned. Maintenance reports were revised. The system moved fast, not to fix the problem, but to protect itself. One inmate worker was pulled from his cell late at night for questioning. When he returned, he refused to speak. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't look up. By morning, he requested protective custody. Whatever he'd been asked to say, or not say, had terrified him more than the illness. And as investigators closed in, one question grew louder with every locked door and unanswered complaint. If this contamination was known, ignored, and allowed to spread, how many people were already paying the price? By the time the outside investigation reached San Quentin's gates, the damage was already done. State inspectors walked through spotless hallways and freshly sanitized kitchens that bore no resemblance to the chaos inmates had lived through days earlier. New gloves. New labels. New logs. On paper, everything looked controlled. Compliant. Safe. But prisons have a way of hiding truth in plain sight. Behind the scenes, staff were warned to keep answers short. Kitchen workers were reassigned or suddenly off schedule. Inmate workers who had handled the contaminated food were separated, moved, silenced under the guise of security concerns. The system didn't need everyone quiet, just the right people. Then the autopsy report leaked. The cause of death listed complications consistent with severe foodborne illness, worsened by delayed medical intervention. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was preventable. That single word ignited everything officials feared. Families spoke out. Former inmates confirmed patterns. Medical experts questioned why the kitchen hadn't been shut down immediately. Why symptoms were dismissed. Why meals continued even after red flags appeared. San Quentin's administration released a statement calling the incident isolated. But evidence suggested otherwise. Internal emails showed early warnings. Supply invoices revealed bulk purchases from a vendor already flagged in other facilities. Cost-saving measures had overridden caution. Food wasn't just nourishment inside San Quentin. It was logistics, control, budget lines, and in this case, a calculated risk. As pressure mounted, one staff member broke ranks. A mid-level supervisor, protected by whistleblower laws, provided investigators with archived logs and unedited footage. The missing hours. The altered temperatures. The moment a shipment was approved despite failing inspection standards. That was the turning point. The official narrative collapsed. The inquiry expanded beyond San Quentin to California's broader prison food system. Contracts were reviewed. Policies rewritten. Heads quietly rolled. But inside the prison, consequences were different. The men who got sick carried lasting effects, digestive damage, chronic weakness, distrust that would never fade. The inmate who died became a number in a report, his name known more to advocacy groups than to the institution that fed him his last meal. San Quentin returned to routine. Trays slid through slots. Doors slammed shut. Life went on, as it always does behind bars. Yet something had changed. For the first time, inmates realized the most dangerous thing in prison wasn't always another inmate, or a shank, or a riot. Sometimes, it was the system itself, working exactly as designed. Because when survival depends on what's on your tray, and the people in charge decide cost matters more than safety, the line between punishment and negligence disappears. And the next meal could always be the one that ends it all.